Alrighty, everybody, welcome back to another video. We are once again taking a look at tasting history. I see that Pikachu back there, and today it's sugar plums, which I did not know was an actual thing until I saw this video. I have no idea what they are. They sound like literal plums just rolled in sugar. It's probably not. If it is, I'd be shocked. But let's see what it is.
Around Christmas time, you hear a lot about sugar plums, visions of sugar plums dancing in children's heads, the sugar plum fairy from the Nutcracker. But what exactly is a sugar plum?
That's what I want to know.
They don't have anything to do with plums.
They don't?
So to
Oh,
answer
thank
the
God.
question, what are sugar plums, I've decided to spend an entire weekend making a Victorian recipe for cherry sugar.
It just looks like tricks. Is a rabbit gonna try and steal these things? Because it really just looks like tricks, like oversized tricks. And I'm assuming these are also probably for kids too.
Plums. We endeavor to figure out what the heck sugar plums are. This time on Tasting History.
I hope it's something that doesn't look too good, because I'm gonna want to try it, and I'm not gonna make it
If you go online
myself.
and look up recipes for sugar plums, you're probably going to find some recipes that have plums and nuts and other fruit kind of all mashed together and then coated with sugar.
Really?
And they are delicious, but they're not sugar plums. Now, there are some historic recipes that have plums with sugar going back to the Tudor
Delights
era,
for ladies?
but again, they're not sugar plums, they're preserved plums. No, the term sugar plums refers to something that has been coated in layer upon layer upon layer of sugar, and what's inside can be an assortment of different things, but it's never plums. And there are very few recipes from the period, the 18th and 19th century when they were popular, for something called sugar plums, and partly that's because they were made by professional confectioners, candy makers, who weren't sharing their recipes with the public, and
Why
partly
would they?
it's because nobody in their right mind would make these at home because they are a lot of work.
Oh,
But guess what? I am not in my right mind. So I got this book, The Art of Confectionery from 1865, and it actually has
1865.
many recipes for different
Jesus.
sugar plums. It has
Where would you even
cinnamon
find
sugar
these
plums,
books?
liqueur sugar plums, aniseed sugar plums, mint sugar plums, and a half dozen others. And while there is no
Let's not
recipe
go with
for
the
a
mint.
plum sugar plum, there is a recipe for an apricot sugar plum, but it
Really?
doesn't actually use the fruit, it just uses the pit, which has to be soaked in different liqueurs to give it flavor.
pit,
And
though?
it takes several months to make. In fact, most
Oh,
of them
geez.
take several months to make, and I'm not going to do that, so I am going to make one that only takes days to make. And that's the recipe for
cherry sugar. Oh, that sounds
Set preserved
lovely.
cherries on a sieve in the stove. When they are partly dry, mix them with pounded sugar and rub them over a sieve. Dry them again and proceed as with Barbary sugar plums. Then we look at the recipe
with
for
Barbary
Barbary
sugar
sugar plums, which adds a few more steps, and one of those steps is to do as you would for sugared almonds, and then you look at the recipe for sugared almonds,
Jesus
and
Christ.
it's very, very long. It's several pages. But essentially, it describes
It's like a choose your own adventure book, except it's the recipe book for sugar plums. The cherry ones sound delicious though. And I'm not even gonna try.
a process of coating almonds, in this case, with layer upon layer of gum arabic and sugar, but it's the machine that they were using to actually make these coatings that's interesting. It says confectioners use a broad, shallow copper basin polished on the inside and kept in constant motion by machinery or by the workmen. And I don't have a team of workmen in my kitchen, so I'm using machinery. And luckily, I have a KitchenAid stand mixer that is fitted out with a panning
That's
attachment,
interesting.
to which I'll put a link in the description if you want to get one. So to get started, what we need are preserved cherries. So first, rinse the cherries under some water to get off as much syrup as possible, and then spread them out onto a pan and select only the ones that aren't broken or smushed. Then set the pan in the oven
looks
at 200
delicious,
degrees
though,
Fahrenheit
itself.
or 95 Celsius for about 3 hours. You'll notice that I also tried making some of
those
these with
chickpeas?
hazelnuts,
No,
but I'm going to follow the
hazelnuts.
cherry ones in the video. After 3 hours, they should be fairly dry, but still probably a little sticky. But at this point, you're going to put them into a sieve and coat them with confectioner's sugar. That is powdered sugar with a bit of starch added. Once the cherries are coated in the sugar,
Just like the what was it? Oh shit. The Turkish delights. Powdered sugar and starch.
Then set them back onto the tray and put them back in the oven for another 2 hours. Then we're going to prepare our first layer of gum arabic, and this is a cold layer of gum arabic, and it's important to get this layer on there, especially if you're using something like nuts, because it is going to provide a barrier between the core and the successive layers of sugar, and it's what's going to let that sugar really adhere to the core. So to make the gum arabic, you mix 4 tablespoons of gum arabic powder with 4 tablespoons of warm water. Then whisk. Gum arabic is quite hard to dissolve, but if you keep whisking, it eventually will become smooth. Then take a couple of tablespoons of that gum arabic and mix it with a couple tablespoons of sugar and mix until the sugar is dissolved. Later on, it'll be sugar syrup that we mix in with it, but this first one specifies that it is cold with regular sugar. Once the mixture is ready, take the cherries out of the oven and put a few into the panning machine. Turn it on the lowest speed, and as the cherries tumble, add a small amount of that gum arabic sugar mixture. Really doesn't take very much, and you want to have a thin stream that you drizzle back and forth over the cherries. Don't just put a big glob in there. Now they will stick to the sides of the pan, so gently dislodge them with a spatula when they do, and then continue to tumble until the gum mixture is fully dried. It should take about 10 to 15 minutes.
Kind of look like gushers.
And just a little bit sticky, we're going to once again coat them in the confectioner's sugar, followed by another coating of gum arabic. This time you'll note that they do not stick to the pan quite as much. Once they're fully dried, give them a third coating of powdered sugar, then set them on the baking sheet.
Damn, that is a lot of work.
Oven at 200 degrees Fahrenheit for 2 hours, then turn off the oven and leave them to sit overnight, or for at least 8 hours.
In the oven?
At this point in the process, you're probably asking, why am I doing this to myself?
Yeah, why?
And it's a good question. You'll also probably look around and realize that your kitchen is an absolute wreck. I'll explain the hairdryer in a bit. Hopefully you've had a good night's rest. It's time for day 2 of making sugar plums.
How many more days after
the cherries
this?
have dried overnight, they should have formed a sort of sugary crust over them. This texture will allow the supersaturated sugar solution to adhere to the sugar plums more easily. Easier than saying supersaturated sugar solution, I can promise you that. It's essentially a mixture of 1 part water to 3 parts sugar plus the addition of flavoring. And the book says that you can add all these different flavors. The most common, though, are vanilla, orange blossom water, or rose water. If you're going to do rose water or orange blossom water, 2 tablespoons is probably going to be enough. If you're doing vanilla, I'd say 1. So add the flavoring to 1 cup of water, then bring this to a gentle boil and add 1 cup of sugar, quickly stirring it in to dissolve, and then once dissolved, add a 2nd cup and stir, and finally a 3rd cup. Then
that's a lot of sugar.
Heat up undisturbed over medium heat, and it's best to use a thermometer for this part, as we want to wait until it reaches between 225 degrees Fahrenheit and 230 degrees Fahrenheit, or 107 and 110 Celsius respectively. This will happen shortly after the sugar boils up and then comes back down. Once it hits the temperature, take it off the heat and let it start to cool down between 170 degrees Fahrenheit and 190 Fahrenheit. So it's nice if you have like a hot plate or something that you can keep that temperature zone. But once it's ready to use, set a handful of cherries in the panning machine, turn it on, and drizzle a spoonful of the sugar syrup over the cherries. Then let them tumble until they are dry. And each layer takes about 10 to 12 minutes to completely dry before you can add the next. So that's a long time, and now you'll see why I was holding a hairdryer.
To speed up the process.
If you use a hairdryer to help dry them, it takes like 1 to 2 minutes. Now as you repeat this layering process, the sugar will begin to crystallize and turn white, and they will start to get bigger and stop sticking together as much. One way to stop so much sticking is to just use a little bit of sugar. It really doesn't take that much to coat them. I learned exactly how much to use through a lot of trial and error. My whole weekend was a lot of trial and error. And swearing. There was a fair amount of swearing.
I can imagine.
It was a long weekend. Luckily, I had a nice, smooth sugar plum with only a tiny hole where the pit was taken out of the cherry. And that is the end of day 2.
Almost doubled in size.
So now the sugar plums need to sit for at least 12 to 24 hours to fully dry and harden before we move on to day 3.
Jeez.
And now it's day 3. And now we're just going to be adding some color to these puppies. So to do this, make the sugar syrup just like you did on day 2, except you don't add any flavoring. Then in a separate pot, heat up 1 cup of water, and once it starts to steam, add an entire cup of the gum arabic, and then whisk. And it will take a while for the gum to dissolve,
that gum arabic's coming back, huh?
It should do so. Once dissolved, pour in the sugar syrup and let it heat. Again, we're looking to reach that 225 degree Fahrenheit mark. This is also about the time
Okay.
that I remembered how much the sugar syrup expanded as it got hot, and
Oh,
so I quickly had to switch the syrup to another pot
it's
that could hold
far
it.
bigger.
Kind of dangerous. Probably shouldn't have done that, but I'm sure glad that I did because the sugar would have definitely boiled over. Then
Yeah,
once the
that's
mixture
not
hits
going to be good.
225 degrees, turn off the heat and let it cool down to 170. And at 170 degrees
Oh,
Fahrenheit, you can
green.
add your coloring. But if you want multiple colors, like
Mm-hmm.
I did, then ladle a couple ladlefuls of the sugar syrup out
Ooh,
into
that
a
doesn't.
separate dish
Ooh,
and then add
what's
the
that on top?
coloring to that. Then repeat the process of drizzling the sugar over the sugar plums just like on day 2.
Can't
5
tell
to
if that's
7
going to be
layers
blue or
should be
green.
enough to give you some good color. I did 4 or
There's some
5
red.
colors. I even made some purple just so they
Oh,
would look a bit more like plums, because there are no actual plums in sugar plums. But if that's the case, then where did they get that name?
good question. Is it because they look
The
like
term sugar
plums?
plum came into use at least by the early 1600s, probably before, and its first written use is pretty interesting. It comes from a book by Thomas Dekker, written in 1608, which details the scams and doings of the criminal types in England at the time, and in the context of the book, the term sugar plums didn't refer directly to the candy, but rather was
Okay.
used as a metaphor for sweet words. Essentially, a constable stops a prostitute on the street
Oh.
and she sweet talks him. And thus, by stopping the constable's mouth with sugar plums, that's to say, whilst she poisons him with sweet words, the punk vanisheth. And yes, at this time, the term
I thought she was going to do a bit more than that, but I guess not.
punk referred to a prostitute.
Huh.
But this use lets us
That's,
know that at least by this time, sugar plums were talking about some sort of candy. And the type of candy was typically layers of sugar surrounding a seed or a bit of spice like aniseed,
Kinda looks like
caraway,
popcorn right there.
coriander, or even a shard of cinnamon. And while the term sugar plum may have been fairly new, the candies were
The fuck is all that other stuff, though? What is... This looks like a taff-eaten pretzel over here. This kind of looks like a pretzel, too. This just reminds me of shrimp for some reason. That's definitely almonds, that I can tell. What are those raisins back there? What the hell is this mishmash of weird crap on plates?
absolutely not. In medieval France, they were called dragées or confits.
Somebody get the rat off
Dragées,
the
later
table.
dragées, would come
And the beetle. Hopefully that's a beetle and not a cockroach. Why would you be...
to refer mostly to nuts coated with sugar. Think of the Jordan almond. While the spices
What the
were
heck was
called
that?
confit or comfit in English. In Italy, this was called confetti, and
Oh.
in Japan, it's competo. And those were
Oh, those are good.
actually brought over by the Portuguese.
Those are pretty
back
much
in the
pure,
16th
pure
century.
sugar.
Comfits would have been present on any wealthy dinner table in the late medieval period or in Renaissance in Europe, and they were there to help sweeten one's breath or to help aid in digestion, kind of like Tums.
Really?
Basically, Tums are the modern version of a comfit. Now, exactly why some of these comfits
Don't
ended
taste
up
as good,
becoming
though.
called sugar plums is unclear. Nobody wrote down, today we have started calling these things sugar plums. But at the time, the term plum could refer to many things other than just an actual plum. It could refer
Really?
to any small piece of dried fruit like raisins or Zante currants, both being the plums added to plum pudding. And
Why
the
do they
term
look
could
like
also
pigs?
refer to just anything that was good
Literal
or
pigs.
kind of rich. Like you could have a plum job that was a really good paying job, or you could be plum rich, just really wealthy, I guess. What is clear is that soon after the word sugar plum started being used to refer to these comfits, it was co-opted by the medical industry. In 1715, there was a mention of purging sugar plums entirely without mercury. So often mentioned in the public prints and
Oh
used
God, they
now
turned
for
it into
several years
medicine.
in great numbers of families, with such great success and liking, not to be distinguished by any mortal living from common sugar plums bought at the confectioner. Only those at the confectioner's are quite round, whereas these are made something flattish. And what precisely did these flattish sugar plums do? Well, they kill,
did they
destroy,
do?
and bring away all sorts of worms with the slimy, corrupted matter that breeds them,
fuck?
having brought away from several men, women, and children great knots of such worms as these. On Christmas Eve, 1714, 2 of these plums brought away alive near half a pint of these sort of worms from the child
what
of Mr.
worms?
Dixon, a tailor, in Feathers Court in St. Martin's Lane.
I want to take a guess as to what these worms are first, though. What the fuck? Like, is it actual, like, literal worms? Like, is it the what do you call, what was it? The fucking, Oh my god, I'm blanking. This always happens. I'm getting fucking old. You know, those worms that live inside your bowels, feed off your food you eat. Some people, uh, like on purpose, took pills that had like their eggs in it so they could lose weight and still, no matter what they ate. What the fuck were they called? Jesus, I don't remember. Is it those things?
Can you imagine someone publishing the fact that you had worms? And not only that, but letting people know your father's name, occupation, and address?
Huh.
Seems unnecessary. Anyway, if you look at the
Yeah,
newspapers
that
of the
that does
18th
sound pretty
century,
bad.
you will find many, many references to these worm-purging sugar plums.
Jesus
And they were
Christ.
made this way so children might be deceived by eating a sweet sugar plum when they will take no manner of physic. That is to say, if your kid will not take his medicine, just wrap it in a bunch of sugar and he won't know the difference. It's
True.
kind of the same way that people get dogs to take a pill, I guess. But even though these sugar plums were very popular for their use, these were not the sugar plums that people were looking for when they went to the confectioner. Nor
least
were
I
the
hope
sugar
not.
plums used by the British military's 32-pounder cannons, but the fact that they sometimes called these cannonballs sugar plums can at least let us know the shape of the candy was often round. A fact made evident by this image
Jesus
of a
Christ,
British
look at his
officer eating
face.
sugar plums. It also shows how they were sold.
Is it? Is that like a one for one drawing, or is this is is this like a cartoon? What was it? A caricature? Because goddamn, people still draw the British like that as a caricature. Times don't change at all, do they?
At the time, and that was in a paper cone. The officers of the corps were invited to play at marbles with his honor, and all the common men had a paper of
Damn, look at this guy on the left. He is short as fuck. Holy shit. Is that your son? Is that why he's eating sugar plums?
plums. Sugar plums remained popular well into the 19th century, and in 1840 there was actually a poem written called Sugar Plums, and it gives some insight to what they were and what they weren't.
Somebody
The sugar
really
plum.
loved sugar plums
Come
then.
fit, come fit my mouth, and I in thy sweet praise will try my hand at feet, with anxious aim to make the meter meet, till Arabic or any other different sort of gum shall water for a sugar plum. Muse, if thy musings can prevail, I'll at it tooth and nail. I have no nerves of taste for syrups, jellies, or preserves. Oh, let them go to pot, may I, as so much worthless scum. They cannot make a sugar plum. Plums from the tree I do not find so plummy to my mind. Orleans or egg unnoticed for my patronage may beg, and damsons may be damned. Ah, I am in a passion, I say, mum, I'll swear not for a sugar plum. I love how clearly the newspaper wasn't allowed to print the word damned.
Yeah.
Scandalous. Now, it was around this time that the author Sir Walter Scott
Really loved
gives us
sugar
a hint
plums,
that sugar
apparently.
plums also referred to sugar-covered nuts, known in French as dragées and in Italian as confetti. In Italy, a specific type of confetti made with
I
almonds
love
were
some
thrown during
sugar-covered
weddings and
peanuts.
during carnival. And instead of calling them confetti, Scott refers to them as sugar
Sugar
plums
plums?
when he wrote compliments flew about like sugar plums at an Italian carnival. While they called them sugar plums in English, in French, it seemed that dragée stuck around and was the catch-all for any of these types of candies, as since the original French name of the sugar plum fairy in Tchaikovsky's Nutcracker Ballet, which premiered in 1892, was La Fée Dragée. Now, this probably most famous mention of sugar plums in the Nutcracker was actually based on the 1816 book by a Prussian author, E.T.A. Hoffmann, and a retelling by Alexander Dumas, though neither
big-ass
mention a
nose.
sugar plum fairy. Though
Oh, wait, is that a
Hoffmann
hat?
does mention something called a Zuckererbsen, which is a sugar pea. And since
Sugar
in the
pea?
scene that he mentions this, he's talking about all these other kinds of candies, I'm assuming that at the time, Zuckererbsen didn't refer to a vegetable, but to a
Sugar
candy.
plums?
And this was made evident when the English translation came out and they translated Zuckererbsen to sugar plum. But again, it wasn't a sugar plum fairy. Rather, these sugar plums were used as artillery. During the Nutcracker's battle with
wow.
the Mouse King, the Nutcracker army advances, and before them went Fred's cannon rattling along, surrounded by cannoneers. And soon, boom, boom, it went, and Maria could see how the mice suffered by the fire,
Damn.
how the sugar plums plunged into their dark, heavy mass, covering them with white powder, and throwing them more than once into shameful
So
disorder.
using the candy
Now,
as
while the
artillery
Nutcracker
then,
does
huh?
give us a connection between sugar plums and Christmas, I think the connection
Also
is
kind of
even
murder.
more evident in the 1823 poem A Visit from St. Nicholas,
Oh.
more often called
Santa
"'Twas the Night
Claus.
Before Christmas"
Oh, really?
by Clement Clark Moore. He's often
wait,
credited
wasn't
with
it?
giving
Yeah.
us much of our current concept of what Santa Claus
Damn
looks like,
Santa.
and he was the first to name St. Nick's 8 reindeer.
It looks
Not
like he was
Rudolph,
having a
came
hard
later.
time.
But it's in this poem that we first hear of when the children were nestled all snug in their beds, while visions of sugar plums danced in their heads. And those sugar plums were probably very much like
Candy.
the ones that I've spent the last 3 days making.
My God.
And here we are. Victorian cherry sugar plums ready for Christmas.
That does sound
But here's
really
the
good,
thing.
though.
They are
Damn, they're
lovely colored,
huge.
but they are not polished. There are recipes to polish them in here using starch and everything, but
That sounds like a pain in the
tried
ass.
It. I couldn't get it to work.
No?
Today,
Oh, that sucks.
they usually polish things. So here's a Jordan almond, which is essentially a sugar plum. I also have ones here made with pine nuts, and they are shiny, like an M&M,
Yeah.
which is essentially a modern-day sugar plum. They often use
Far simpler, though.
different shellac and other things to give these smooth, shiny polish. They didn't use that back in the day, so they probably, even when they were polished, were never as shiny as the modern ones. Anyway, let's
Damn,
give it
those
a
are
try.
huge.
I'll go with green.
I'm expecting a crunch. Yeah, there we go. That's a shit ton of sugar, though.
It's quite hard.
Do you still taste the cherry? Or is it all pure sugar now?
That sugar, you're getting the orange.
Oh,
You get
he,
a little
oh,
bit
he used
of
the orange
cherry.
water.
What's crazy is it feels like there's not much cherry left. A hint, but it's mostly
Just a hint.
sugar, and that's kind of what it's supposed to be.
that
But I
kinda
also
sucks.
made some with hazelnuts, so I'm
Oh.
gonna try that. They're much smaller.
Is that better?
It's more like a Jordan almond.
I'm not kind of want to try that cherry
There's
one.
less layers of the sugar. Yeah, you get more of the hazelnut flavor. I really like that. Anyway, delicious. Are they worth the work?
Probably not.
No, they are not.
Yeah, I
Go
didn't
get
think so.
yourself some Jordan almonds. Go get yourself some of these pine nut
But what
covered
if I want the
things.
cherries?
What's cool is these are actually made pretty much the same way that they were in this cookbook, because the only ingredients are sugar, pine nuts, and gum arabic.
Oh,
So made the same way, which is pretty cool.
but I want the cherries. And the orange
Honestly,
water.
There are modern versions of sugar plums still out there. We just don't call them sugar plums. And what we do call sugar plums now aren't sugar plums. I mean, I guess if you want it to be a sugar plum, it is, because that's how language works, but they're not what Victorians would have called sugar plums. That said, if you want to make one of those modern versions of sugar plums, Alton Brown has a really good recipe. Just Google Alton Brown sugar plums. I haven't made them, but they look really good, and they only take like 45 minutes to make, I think.
Rather than 3 days,
And
huh?
they include plums. So I'll probably do those for Christmas, because I'm not going to make any more of these. Also, 2 things.
Just ship some to
One,
me. I'll try
Don't
that
forget
cherry
the
one.
Tasting History Cookbook, since we are buying our holiday gifts. It makes an excellent gift. But 2, I just had a TV show come out. A year and a half ago, I was asked to be
Ooh.
on a competition show as a judge, and it's called Clash of the Cookbooks. It's on Roku, so if you have access to Roku,
I do
go
not.
watch it. So have a
I do
Merry,
not.
Merry
I'm
Christmas,
sorry.
a Happy Holidays, and I will see you next time on Tasting History.
Huh. I expected it to taste more like pure sugar. And I guess it did. They still look like tricks to me. I really want to try that cherry one, though. Oh, it looked really good. On the inside, like when you showed that split open one, oh, that looked really good. But I'm not spending 3 days making something. I don't even have 3 days to be making something. Hell no. Jeez. Maybe I could buy some somewhere. Either way, that looked delicious. And I think this might be the last one I check out from Tasting History. I don't know. I'm going to have to go through their channel more, see if there's anything that really catches my interest. But if y'all got a suggestion for something, go ahead and let me know. And if you want to look at more of their videos on your own, I do, as always, have a link to their channel in the description, so go and check them out. So until next time, y'all, thanks for watching, and goodbye.